I was suspended from my job before anyone even told me what I'd done wrong. My badge stopped working. My email was locked. By noon, half my coworkers wouldn't even look at me. By the end of the day, I was being blamed for something everyone else helped hide. Here's how it happened. It started with a mistake so small I almost ignored it. I work in operations for a mid-sized logistics company. Nothing glamorous. Paperwork, approvals, tracking numbers, vendor invoices. The kind of job where being detail-oriented matters, but nobody thanks you for it. I'd been there almost 5 years. Long enough to know how things actually worked versus how they were written in policy manuals. One Tuesday afternoon, I was reconciling invoices when I noticed a discrepancy. A recurring charge from one of our vendors didn't match the approved contract amount. It was off by a few $100s. Not once every month, going back almost a year. At first, I assumed it was a typo or a system glitch. Stuff like that happens all the time. I flagged it, made a note to ask my supervisor later, and kept working. But something about it bothered me. The numbers were too consistent. Same amount, same vendor, same approval initials. I pulled the contract. The charge wasn't just wrong. It shouldn't have existed at all. I checked our internal notes. No amendment, no approval trail, nothing explaining why we were paying extra every month. So I did what I thought was the responsible thing. I emailed my supervisor, Mark, asking if he could clarify the discrepancy. He replied an hour later with a single sentence. "Leave it alone. It's already been handled. That should have been the end of it." That's how things usually go. You learn quickly in corporate environments when not to push. But the word handled stuck with me, because nothing in the system showed it had been handled. And if it had, there would be documentation. I waited a day, then another. The charge processed again, so I dug a little deeper. I pulled reports from other departments. Same vendor, same extra charge. Different cost centers, all approved by different people, but always routed through the same internal review queue.
Mine.
That's when my stomach dropped, because it meant my name was attached to approvals I never made. I checked my login history. Nothing suspicious. No unusual access. But the approvals were stamped with my credentials anyway. At that point, I stopped thinking about invoices and started thinking about blame. I asked Mark if we could talk privately. He postponed, twice, then canceled altogether. Co-workers started acting strange. Conversations stopped when I walked into rooms. Slack messages went unanswered. A friend from accounting warned me quietly, "Just be careful right now." Careful about what? The next morning, HR called me into a meeting. No warning, no context. They asked me to hand over my badge and laptop temporarily. Said it was a routine review. Said not to worry. I worried. They showed me a spreadsheet of unauthorized approvals totaling tens of thousands of dollars. My name highlighted on every line. I told them the truth, that I'd never approved them, that I'd flagged the issue, that I had emails to prove it. HR nodded politely and said they'd look into it. By lunch, I was locked out of everything. That's when the rumors started. Someone told people I'd been skimming money. Someone else said I'd cut a deal with a vendor. A third version claimed I was about to be arrested. No one asked me directly. They just decided who I was. I sat at home refreshing my inbox, replaying every decision I'd made, wondering if I should have stayed quiet, if asking that first question had been the moment everything went wrong. Then Mark finally called. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't say hello. He just said, "You shouldn't have gone digging." That's when I realized this wasn't about a mistake. It was about something everyone knew and nobody wanted exposed. And somehow, by doing the right thing, I'd made myself the easiest person to sacrifice. Once Mark hung up on me, the silence that followed felt louder than the accusation itself. I sat on my couch staring at my phone, replaying his words over and over. "You shouldn't have gone digging." Not "you made a mistake." Not "this is a misunderstanding." Just that. A warning, or maybe a confession. I pulled out my laptop, my personal one, not the work device HR had taken, and started organizing everything I had. Emails, screenshots, timestamps. I wasn't panicking yet, but I could feel something tightening in my chest. The kind of pressure that comes when you realize you're standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, and everyone else has already agreed on a story without you. The more I reviewed the records, the clearer the pattern became. Those unauthorized charges weren't random. They were spread out deliberately across departments, always small enough to avoid triggering audits, always routed through people who were either too busy or too trusting to question them. And somehow, my credentials had become the final stamp of approval. I hadn't been framed out of nowhere. I'd been positioned. That night, I got a text from Jenna in accounting, the same one who had warned me earlier. I probably shouldn't say this, but you didn't act alone in their version of events. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What does that mean? She took a few minutes to reply. They're saying you were the last link in a chain, that you knew how it worked, that you benefited. Benefited how? I hadn't seen a cent. The next day, HR emailed me requesting a formal interview. They attached a list of questions that read less like fact-finding and more like a script they wanted me to follow. Why did I approve the charges? When did I begin working with the vendor? Did I feel pressured by financial stress? It was surreal, like they'd already written the ending and were just filling in dialogue. I answered everything honestly. I showed them my email to Mark. I explained the missing documentation. I asked them to check access logs more carefully. They nodded, took notes, thanked me for my cooperation. Then they suspended me indefinitely, pending investigation. That was the moment fear turned into anger, because while I was sitting at home unable to work, unable to defend myself publicly, the people actually involved were still in the building, still approving invoices, still smiling in meetings. I started calling people directly, carefully, quietly. Most didn't answer. A few did and spoke like they were reading from cue cards. I don't really remember. That's above my pay grade. I was just following instructions. One person slipped. It was Leo, a senior analyst who'd been there longer than me. We'd never been close, but he trusted me enough to talk off the record. "Look," he said, lowering his voice even though we were on the phone. "This has been going on for years. Different vendors, different charges. It keeps certain relationships smooth." "What relationships?" I asked. He hesitated. "The kind that keep contracts coming in. The kind leadership doesn't want disrupted." "So why me?" I asked. "Why put my name on it?" Another pause, longer this time. "Because you're clean," he said. "No implants, no politics, and you asked the question." That was it. The unforgivable act. Not stealing, not lying, asking. A week later, I was called back in for another meeting, this time with legal present. They laid it out plainly. If I cooperated, if I accepted responsibility for procedural failures, resigned quietly, and signed a non-disclosure agreement, they would not pursue further action. No charges, no lawsuit, no ruined career, just silence. I asked what would happen if I didn't. The lawyer didn't threaten me. He didn't need to. He just said, "These things can get very complicated." I left the building shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of the choice in front of me. If I stayed quiet, I'd lose my job but keep my freedom. If I fought, I might clear my name or become the only person punished for something everyone else normalized. That night, I couldn't sleep because I realized something worse than being blamed was happening. They weren't afraid I'd lied. They were afraid I'd tell the truth. And I was starting to wonder whether telling it would actually make anything better or just destroy me completely. By the time HR finally called me back in, I already knew how this was going to end. Not because they'd said anything, because everyone had gone quiet. No updates, no timelines. No, we're still investigating. Just silence. The kind that tells you decisions are being made in rooms you're not invited into. When I walked into the conference room, 3 people were already seated. HR, legal, and Mark. Mark didn't look at me. HR started with rehearsed sympathy. We understand this situation has been stressful. Legal slid a document across the table. Termination. Violation of internal controls. Failure to safeguard credentials. Loss of trust. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was clean. Too clean. They weren't firing me for stealing. They were firing me for allowing the system to be abused. I asked one question, just one. If my credentials were used without my knowledge, why isn't IT investigating that? Legal answered without hesitation. They did. There was no evidence of external compromise. So someone internally used my access. Silence. HR cleared her throat. We believe it was a procedural lapse. A lapse that conveniently stopped at me. I realized then what had actually happened. The vendor overcharges weren't random. They were a quiet pool of money. Spread thin, hidden across departments, small enough no one screamed, big enough to matter over time. Promotions, bonuses, favors. Everyone took a slice. And when I flagged it, the system didn't panic. It adapted. They couldn't erase the money trail, but they could erase the person attached to it. Me. I didn't sign anything that day. I asked for copies. I left. 2 weeks later, I found out something that made my hands shake. A former coworker messaged me anonymously. Just one sentence. They fixed the issue after you left. No refund. No disclosure. No accountability. The charges stopped. The vendor stayed. Mark got promoted. I filed a complaint with an external compliance agency. Provided emails, logs, timelines. 6 months passed. Nothing happened. No investigation. No follow-up. No whistleblower protection. Just a polite email thanking me for my concern. I took a lower-paying job somewhere else. New company. New badge. Same systems. Same smiles. Sometimes I wonder if I should have ignored that invoice. If keeping my head down would have kept my life intact. But here's the part that still messes with me. If everyone benefits from a lie, and only one person tells the truth, is that person brave or just stupid? If you think you would have handled this differently, or if you think I destroyed my own life for nothing, leave a comment and tell me what you would have done. I realized I was being questioned by the police about a night I barely remembered. A night I thought meant nothing, a favor I did for a stranger without thinking, and a lie I helped tell that somehow rewrote someone else's life. The worst part wasn't that they thought I was involved. It was that, by the end of the interview, I wasn't sure I wasn't. Here's how it happened. It started on a Friday night. I almost stayed home. I'd had a long week and zero plans. One of those nights where you scroll aimlessly, debating whether to order takeout or just sleep. Around 9, my phone buzzed. A friend of a friend, someone I'd met maybe twice, texted asking if I wanted to meet up at a downtown bar. I went mostly out of boredom. The place was crowded, loud. The kind of bar where conversations blur together and nobody remembers how they got home. I was halfway through my first drink when someone slid onto the empty stool next to me. He introduced himself casually. Normal name, normal clothes. Nothing about him stood out, which I'd later realize was the point. We talked. Small stuff. Work. The city. How everyone pretends they're doing better than they are. He had an easy way of talking that made you feel like you already knew him. About 20 minutes in, he leaned closer and said, "This is going to sound weird, but I could use a favor." I laughed. "Depends how weird." He gestured toward the entrance. "There's an event happening upstairs. Private. I just need to get in for a few minutes." I assumed fake ID, sneaking past security, something harmless. I shook my head. "Not my thing." He smiled. "I don't need you to break any rules. I just need you to say you know me." That was it. No money, no pressure, just a validation. Apparently the guest list policy was strict. Names only, no plus ones unless verified by someone already inside. He said he was supposed to meet someone but got there early. If I vouched for him, they'd let him wait upstairs. I hesitated. I didn't know him. Not really, but it felt small, trivial, the kind of thing people do all the time without consequences. So I nodded. We walked to the entrance together. Security asked if I knew him. I said yes. They waved him through. He thanked me, sincerely, said I'd saved him a huge headache. Then he disappeared into the crowd. I stayed at the bar another hour, forgot about him entirely, and went home. That should have been the end of it. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. They asked me where I was on that Friday night. When I told them, the voice on the other end paused and said, "We need you to come in and answer a few questions." That's when I started replaying the night in my head. Every detail, every word, every face, trying to remember the stranger whose name I barely knew, and wondering how a harmless favor turned into something serious enough for police involvement, and why they were treating me like I hadn't just helped someone, but enabled them. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking, because I had a feeling that night wasn't just connected to one lie. It was connected to something much bigger, and I was already part of it whether I liked it or not. The interview room was smaller than I expected. No window, just a metal table, 2 chairs, and a recorder sitting between us like it had weight. They asked me to start from the beginning. I told them the truth, or at least what I thought was the truth, about the bar, the stranger, the favor. I even admitted how careless it was, expecting a lecture or maybe a warning. Instead, one of the officers asked, "Did he mention a name?" I froze. I realized I couldn't remember it clearly. I gave them something close enough, or at least I thought I did. They exchanged a look I didn't like. Then they slid a photo across the table. It was him. Same face, same neutral expression. But the context was wrong. Mugshot lighting, date stamp from years ago. "Do you recognize this man?" they asked. "Yes," I said, too quickly. "That's interesting," the officer replied, "because that name you gave us doesn't exist." My mouth went dry. They explained slowly, carefully, like you would to someone already panicking. The man I vouched for had multiple aliases, fraud charges in 2 states, an open investigation tied to identity theft, false testimony, and something they wouldn't elaborate on yet. And the event upstairs? It wasn't a party. It was a private fundraiser tied to a legal case. The room felt like it tilted. They asked if I knew who he met that night. I didn't. Asked if I saw him again. I hadn't. Asked if he contacted me later. No. Then they asked the question that changed everything. "Do you know why you were the one he approached?" I shook my head. They pulled out another document. A list of attendees from the event upstairs. Names I didn't recognize except one. It was someone I'd testified against years earlier in a civil case. Nothing dramatic, just a workplace dispute. I'd been honest. They'd lost. I hadn't thought about it since. Apparently, the stranger had. He wasn't just trying to get into the room. He was trying to be recognized by the right people, and not recognized by the wrong ones. And my face, my name, my casual, "Yeah, I know him," gave him exactly what he needed. The officer leaned back and said, "From the outside, it looks like you helped establish his credibility." I wanted to argue, to scream that I didn't know, that I wouldn't have done it if I had. But intent didn't matter as much as impact. They let me leave that day, but not before saying, "Don't travel. Don't discuss this with anyone. And if he contacts you, call us immediately." I went home and couldn't sleep. I replayed the night again and again. Every detail sharpened. His timing, his tone, how easily he slid into conversation, how quickly he'd asked for the favor, like he already knew the answer. That's when something clicked that made my chest tighten. He hadn't picked me randomly. He'd studied me. My social media was public. My past testimony was public record. My habits, my hangouts, all visible. I wasn't unlucky. I was useful. A week later, I got an email from an unknown address. No subject line, just one sentence. Thanks again for helping me out that night. No name, no threat, just a reminder. And that was when I realized the investigation wasn't really about what happened upstairs. It was about what he'd planned long before we ever met. And whatever it was, it wasn't finished yet. The police never told me when they officially considered me cleared. They just stopped calling. At first, I thought that meant I was safe, that whatever case they were building no longer needed me. I went back to work, tried to fall into routine again, tried to convince myself that one bad decision hadn't permanently rerouted my life. But safety doesn't feel like silence. It feels like closure. And I never got that. A month after the interview, the fundraiser case went public. Headlines everywhere. Testimonies questioned. Evidence challenged. One key witness suddenly recanted, claiming coercion and mistaken identity. The case collapsed. No charges. No accountability. Just a lot of carefully worded apologies from people with expensive lawyers. I recognized one name in the articles. Someone who had been upstairs that night. Someone whose credibility hinged on knowing the right people. Knowing me, that's when the guilt stopped being abstract. Because nothing illegal was ever traced directly back to me. No law said I was responsible. No document had my signature. But without my face, my casual nod, my throwaway lie, none of it would have worked as smoothly as it did. I told myself the police would still get him, that someone like that always slips eventually. They didn't. Instead, I found him. Or maybe he found me. I was standing in line at a grocery store when I felt that sensation, you know, the one, like someone's eyes are on you. I turned. He was 2 aisles over. Same neutral expression. Same forgettable face. He didn't approach, didn't wave, didn't smile. He just nodded once. Recognition. That night, I got another email. Different address. Same tone. Funny running into you again. Hope life's treating you well. No threats. No demands. Just presence. That's what terrified me. Because I finally understood something the police never said out loud. People like him don't disappear. They rotate. Different names. Different cities. Same strategy. And people like me, we don't get punished. We get used. I considered replying. Asking him why me. Asking what he actually needed that night. I never did. But sometimes I wonder if not responding was the wrong move. If silence just leaves space for someone else to step in. Someone less careful. Someone who won't even question the favor. Here's the part that still messes with my head. If you help someone lie once without knowing, and that lie changes the outcome of someone's life, are you innocent forever, or just lucky the law can't measure consequences? If you were in my place, would you have helped him that night, or would you have trusted your instincts and walked away? Say it honestly. If the story messed with your head even a little, you're not alone. These are the kinds of stories that don't give clean answers, only uncomfortable questions. If you want more real, unsettling Reddit stories that make you rethink what you do in the same situation, subscribe now, because the next story might hit even closer than this one did.